What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be checking out Track by Track, my collab with Rufus Mann on Left Behind. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so this is by request. Some of you guys have really been interested in how I go about, track by track with different collabs with different people, especially with my vocal stuff, guitars, bass, drums alike, just basically how I go about doing it, and I wanted to show you how I did Left Behind. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so this is the final product right here. Here's the track. Alright, so that's it. That's just, the final finished product before I went and used Ozone 8 and mastered it. So let's just go track by track, alright? We'll start with the easy one, the drums. The drums are MIDI drums. I use Superior Drummer 3, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I use the Gent style for this. Oh no, I use Metal Organic, okay. So I use the Metal Organic kit, and this is what it sounds like. Alright, now honestly, the only thing I really did differently with the Metal Organic is I added a reverb on the snare just to give it a little more body. And that's basically all I ever did. With Superior Drummer, man, it's so awesome in-house. I don't even really mess with it. I just kind of just throw it on the MIDI and then it's good to go. So on the drum bus, all I have is Joe Wanasek BG drums by Joey Sturgis Tones, and just a little bit of compression just to glue it all together and then bring down the volume just a tad so it doesn't clip, and that's it, man. Good to go. So drums, easiest part. I don't really do much with the drums. Alright, so we'll do my guitar parts first. I'll open up the guitars. So as you can see, it's quad track guitars here. I use my Axe Effects for the mix stuff, and I use the Headrush pedal board for the gym stuff. And then here's the guitars soloed. And for this project, I really wanted to have a lot of nasty high end, because if you listen to Left Behind off of Iowa, the original track, there is so much high end and like nastiness. It doesn't really sound clean and polished. It sounds aggressive and dirty, and it sounds like crap, honestly. And that's kind of what I was going for here. I was trying to make it like rather scooped with a lot of high end brittle, not fizz, but just harshness. So that's kind of what my mentality was for this track. So all the tracks are completely clean. So again, mix is Axe Effects, Jim is Headrush pedal board. They're both completely clean. How I pan them is the main guitar tracks I'm at about 60, and then the subsequent, the supplemental track, as I like to call it, the second track is all the way to the right and or all the way to the left. All right. So for the bus, there's only 4 plugins. This is pretty elaborate for me. I try to not have as many, I try to have fewer plugins the better, but I do have 4 plugins on my guitar bus, excuse me. And first one I always have is the Virtual Mix Rack by Slate Digital, and this is just something I created. The heavy guitars, you have this is all obviously not real stuff, but just a modified preamp, a VCC channel, a little bit of EQ, and then some shimmer and thickness. So the preamp, basically all it does is just adds a little more drive, a little more saturation, and then with the EQ, all it really did was just have a little bit of high end here, almost 3 dBs of high end, around 7K, and everything else is just pretty much flatline. That's all I added for that. And then with the Revival, just a little bit of shimmer and a little bit of thickness, and then that's all I really use for Virtual Mix Rack. So basically my main thing I want to use for Virtual Mix Rack is the preamp here. It's very subtle. honestly, if you're not listening with headphones, you can't really even tell the difference. But if I go exaggerated, hear it to start to break up, right? So that's all really that preamp's for. So then next, I have a EQ. It looks rather busy, but it's not. High pass, low pass. High pass is at about 100, 96. Low pass at 15K, just to get rid of the really harsh stuff and let the cymbals breathe. And then this spot right here around the 5K is probably the most important thing that I've learned as of late, about the past year. Something I really try to focus on is the like really sharp and like kind of unwanted sounds around the 5K range. So I'll solo these. And then if you go extreme, I'll add the gain, see. So I just try to tuck that extreme, harsh, brittle sound just a tad. And then I have some dips in the low mids and in the mids. That's just to let the snare breathe. I found out with the Metal Organic drum track, the snare really lives around the low mids of the guitars and the mids of guitars. So when you scoop the mids and low mids on my guitars, it brings out the snare, and then that is like ultimately the pulse, the main pulse of the track, you know what I mean? So that's what I try to do there. And then a little bump in the low mids just to give it a little bit of body, just a slight bump, boost, excuse me. And then a slight boost around, let's see what I'm at, yeah, 1.5, 1.6K, just to give it a little more punch, a little bit more standoutish in the mix. So here's guitars all together. So it just cleans it up. Alright, next is the C4 plugin by Waves, and then honestly this is probably the most important part of my guitar bus, and basically this just gets rid of all the low end, not like mud when you do palm mutes. It really clamps down on it, and palm mutes tend to live, you know, around between 92 and give or take 300 hertz. So that's just something I just throw on. I just bypass all the other multi-bands, you know, and then it's good to go. So that plugin is really crucial for like breakdown stuffs and low palm mute chugs. This song doesn't really have too much of it, but I like to have it there just as like a safety blanket so it doesn't muddy up my track. And then finally, last thing on the bus is just BG Bus Guitars by Joel Wanasek. And what's awesome about this plugin is it has the Chug Slayer, which acts as a multi-band compressor in the low mids. Again, it clamps down on the chugs, but I like having the Waves plugin before this plugin, and then you have two multi-band compressors just hitting the chugs at different stages, and that way it's like double safety blanket. And they do different things. I really found the Chug Slayer is like very subtle, and I found the Waves plugin, you know, since it's not a fixed threshold and ratio and attack and release and stuff, you can really dial it in. So the Chug Slayer to me is just like the final touch, just like the thing that, if anything, if the Waves plugin doesn't clamp down on anything, the Joel Wanasek thing plugin will clamp down. Hope that makes sense. So that's guitars, and then bus. All right, so this is Rufus. This is Rufus clean track, and then dirty track. He sent me them. I didn't mess with them. I trusted him. He wanted his tone the way he wanted it, so I didn't mess with them. So here's the dirty track soloed. So it's the same DI, just one's dirty, one's clean, and I'm 99% sure he's using the Neural DSP Dark Glass Ultra plugin. 99% sure. If I'm wrong, Rufus, I'm really sorry. So then for the bass bus, again, I have four different plugins. Virtual mix rack. I use a preset on this one, the warm present bass. I honestly don't even really like. I didn't even really spend much time to look in-house of what's doing what. I just clicked on it. It sounded good, and yeah, that's really all I did. So just a little bit of compression and a little bit of thickness is what I gained from the virtual mix rack, first thing in the chain. Excuse me. Alright, next I have another EQ, and basically all I do with this is just have a little bit of high pass, low pass, and then I have a huge dip around 2K, and then a slight bump at around 1.8. Yeah, just because I didn't like the harsh sound of 2K, but then I didn't want to like completely get rid of it. It kind of didn't. Here, I'll just play it. So when I got rid of 2K, it really got rid of the harsh sound, but then 1.8, 1.7, it kind of just gave it a little bit of the high-end clank with like not as much attack and aggression and harsh sounding. So again, I'll solo them. So I wanted a little bit of high end, but I really wanted to get rid of around the 2K range. I thought it sounded really disgusting. And Rufus himself requested I get rid of 2K because he didn't like it, but he also wanted a little bit of high end attack. So that's what I did with that EQ. Next is the Slate Digital Virtual Tape Machine. This gives it a little bit more thickness and warmth. Just a slight boost in input, and then it automatically reduces the output. Very, very subtle. You probably won't even be able to hear the difference. Just the slightest bit. So to me, it just makes it sound more real and this more organic. It's the best way I could describe it. And lastly, Joel Wanasek BG Bass. What's awesome about this plugin is it splits your low end and your high end, so you can adjust as needed for the track to make them sound how you want them to sound. So for this, I always squash the low end and always bring it down pretty low, so it's just solid all the way throughout. And then I don't compress the high end as much because I like the high end to have peaks and valleys and spike and let the transients shine through in the track when the clank comes in. So as you can hear, this plugin does wonders. It really tames the low end and then allows the high end clank to really push through in the mix. And that's all I did for bass. Alright, now we'll talk about my vocals. Now my vocals have been something that I've been really working on for ever since I started, 2 years ago, just constantly trying to get better and better, and I think I finally got it down pretty well with the help of a few plugins. So we'll do my screams first. So how I did it is I had a main scream, and then I had Chris Fane. That's, I did his parts separately. It's Chris and Clown, but I just call them Chris Screams. What I do with all my main screaming vocals is I always have a main one, and then I always have one kind of sitting underneath it just to give it more body and more fullness. Because if you have one scream, I found it's not as in your face, and just doubling it, it just makes it sound absolutely huge. So that's one thing I always do. So here's one scream by itself. And the other one. So you can hear they sound different, but the two of them combined makes it sound awesome. And then I'll check out the Chris Screams here, as I call them. Feel it all slipping away, I'll torch you. We let it all slip away, I ignore you. So with those, I pan them a little bit right and left just so it gives a more wider effect, allows my main vocal to breathe, and it just makes it sound, you know, huge. Alright, so now how I mixed my screams, it's very, very simple. On all of the tracks, all I use is Joey Sturgis gain reduction. Just throw it on. I don't touch the out of the box setting. All I do is just hit the lo-fi button on all my tracks, and that's all I do, man. So I love gain reduction. It's my favorite plugin by Joey Sturgis, hands down. And so again, for the bus, first thing I use is virtual mix rack, another preamp, a virtual distressor, a little bit of EQ, and then a little bit of thickness. So with the London tube collection, basically all it is just a modified, or not a modified, what's the word I'm looking for? Modeled, jeez, almost had an aneurysm. A modeled preamp for vocals. It can be used on a lot of things, but I use it for vocals. And then the distressor module here is just to kind of even out more your peaks and valleys on your bus. And then the EQ, all I do is just got rid of a little bit the high shelf here, get rid of the harshness, and then just a little bit of a high pass, and then again just getting rid of more of the sharp high end. Oops. Yeah, and then I'm trying to remember what I did here. And then just a little bit of thickness, and that's it. That's all I use for my scream vocals. I'll be honest, a lot of this stuff is just, I just hit the preset and it's good to go. Like for here, vocal fattener, vocals in your face. I mean, that's obviously made for extreme stuff for vocals. So I just throw that on, man. I love presets because it helps me, you know, not do the engineering side and just focus on doing the creative side. So it's awesome. So that is my chain in-house in Slate Digital Virtual Mix Rack. Next, all I have is a de-esser by Eosis. And all I use is the wet vocal bus de-essing. So let me go back to the virtual mix rack and I'll A/B this. Let it all slip away. I ignore you. I feel it all slipping away. Can't towards you. Feel it all slipping away. Can't towards you. Feel it all slipping away. Can't towards you. So what I hear from that when I use the virtual mix rack is I hear a lot more thickness and I hear a lot less brittleness, and I feel more warmth. You know what I mean? Like when it's off, it just sounds really, really brittle, and I don't like that at all. Alright, next again is the de-esser. Feel it all slipping away. Can't towards you. Feel it all slipping away. And all that does is just cleans up your T's, your S's, and your P's, and just all like the little nuances of air, you know, with the different consonants that you use when you speak. It just cleans it up, and yeah. So I just again use the wet vocal bus de-essing. It's a preset, and I just run with it. You know what I mean? And lastly is the virtual, is the Joe Wanasek BG vocals. And all I use here is just a little bit of aggression, just a little more saturation, and then I just compress it pretty heavily and then just bring down the volume. And so with that plugin, it really tames my screams and keeps them in check. You know, you can hear when it's turned off. My screams really just like take over the track, and I just like that compressor really just seriously clamps down my vocals, and it creates a huge wall of sound consistently as opposed to like peaks and valleys again. So I really like the Joe Wanasek Bus Glue series if you haven't figured that out already. And then lastly, we'll talk about my cleans. Now my cleans are my most self-conscious, I guess you could say, just because I don't really think I'm a singer. I sing it, you know, in the shower and in my car, but I've never like performed singing really much of any, you know, ever. So this is just it's a little new to me. It's a little intimidating for me. But here are my cleans soloed.
Faces that have disappeared in time find me wrapped in glass and slowly soaked in lime. Faces that have disappeared in time find me wrapped in glass and slowly soaked in lime.
So those are my cleans. Again, kind of like the screams, I have a main one, and then I have pan right and left just to give it a huge widening effect, and it allows everything to breathe and not be just like, you know, straight down the middle, because you already have your bass and your drums right down the middle for the most part. So if you just have a huge wall of vocals on top of that, everything kind of gets buried. So it's good for me, and I think a lot of people obviously do this, is just pan it out, give it a more of a 3D effect, and it just allows things to push through at different spots sonically. So all my clean vocals, again, have gain reduction. This one does not have the lo-fi on it, lo-fi button engaged, but I believe, yeah, these two do. Just to give it a more sonic variety, so it's not...
Faces that have disappeared in time find me wrapped in glass and slowly soaked in lime.
On the bus, virtual mix rack again, I use a preset on this one, I'm 99% sure. Yeah, I use warm vocals. I don't even really bother to look at what it's doing, really. I just throw it on and I move on with it. If I don't like it, I'll go to vocals and I'll try another one. You know what I mean? I really just pick something and run with it. And if I don't like the way it sounds, I change it. I don't like to mix with my eyes too much. I kind of just like when a company like Slate, for example, uses something that they put so much time and effort into it, why insult them with their presets and try to make something better that they've already spent hours and days and months and years trying to perfect. I hope that makes sense. So next, have another de-esser, the same exact de-esser with the same exact setting, just the wet vocal bus de-essing. And then the pedal board, I used a little bit of delay here just to kind of give it like a nice airy, you know, lead effect.
Faces that have disappeared in time find me wrapped in glass and slowly soaked in lime.
So you can hear when it trails off, just a little subtle effect, just a nice little thing. And then I had a little bit of reverb for the clean vocals. I used the Big Room preset for the Chromoverb, the stock Logic plugin, just to give it a slight little bit of reverb, because you don't want to drown it in reverb, because then it just sounds like absolute garbage. Lastly, you guessed it, I used the Joel Wanasek bus glue vocals again, but this one I didn't use a lot of aggression because I didn't want to saturate and make my cleans harsh. I tried to keep them relatively clean, but I did use the tone option here.
Faces that have disappeared in time find...
Which to me just sounds like it makes it a little more brighter. If I have it at 0, it's rather dark. At 100, it's very, very bright. A little bit of aggression just to give it a little more push. Find a little push there, but you've already compressed it so much on gain reduction, and now you're compressing it again, you know, on the vocal bus. You don't want to compress too much, because then you start to, I find you start to get really, really saturated, and then it sounds pretty bad. So those are all the tracks, and then lastly, on my stereo out, just have a little bit of high pass and low pass. You would say 58 hertz is pretty high, but man, I've had a lot of problems with my low end in years past, and I found it's okay to be a little aggressive with it. Like I used to have it at like 25 or 30 hertz just to like be safe, but even then it would be very, 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 very muddy and very bassy, and I could not get a clean mix. So I went, you know what, I'm just gonna go aggressive with it and almost go to 60 hertz, and I find that works almost, you know, perfect for me. So I love that. And then I have the high cut at 12 just to give it some body. It's actually a little even, excuse me, not body. I have it at 1200 hertz, excuse me, just to tame the harsh end again. But even looking back on it, that's a little high. I usually don't go, or that's a little low. I usually don't go that low. I usually have it around 15K. So that's interesting. I don't know why I did that. But Last two plugins, Joe Wanasek, BG Mix. It's very subtle fixed ratio and all that. I like to use the Slate digital virtual mix bus, I think it's called, bus compressor, something like that. What is it here? What's that called? Slate digital virtual bus compressor. Yeah, I like to use that sometimes, but sometimes I have problems with it, especially with a lot of fast double kick. It starts to like wash in and out. So I like the Joey Sturgis, Joe Wanasek BG Mix. I like that a lot. And then last thing I use is the Fab Filter limiter. This thing, this kind of just like, I use it ideally kind of like a compressor. I have the output at around -4 dB with a little boost of the signal, and to me that just like is the final push before I master it with Ozone 8. It kind of just like pushes everything together, and it makes it louder in the end, and it doesn't like have as many peaks and valleys. Yes, I already compressed it, but once I compress it, then I boost up the signal, and it just works for me. So it's really subtle, but I find that it just like it makes it a little bit louder in the end, and it kind of just glues everything together. Again, I kind of use it like a compressor as much as I do a limiter. And that's track by track my Left Behind collab with Rufus Mann. Alright boys, I am out of here. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you learned something. If I did something that you really don't agree with, I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to learn from you guys. Or if you have your own ideas of what you would do differently or what you do in your own projects, leave it all down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. There are many ways to mix, but this is just how I do it, and this is how I did it for this project. Alright boys, I'm out of here. Stay metal, and I'll see you guys next time.